The briefing room at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado fell silent when she walked in. Not the respectful kind of silence that greets a decorated operator, but the uncomfortable quiet that precedes judgment. Lieutenant Kira Volkov moved through the rows of seated Marines with the fluid economy of someone who'd learned long ago that wasted motion was wasted energy. Her boots made no sound on the polished floor. Her hands stayed loose at her sides. Her eyes scanned the room once, cataloging exits and angles with the automatic precision of someone who'd done this in worse places than a climate-controlled briefing room in Southern California. She took a seat in the back corner, the one with clear sightlines to both doors. The whispers started immediately. They always did. "That's her, the SEAL who doesn't talk." Heard she went through Bud S without saying 10 words. "Bullshit, nobody makes it through Hell Week that quiet." My buddy was in her class, said she never screamed once. Not during log PT, not during surf torture, not during anything. Just stared straight ahead like a goddamn robot. Probably can't talk, birth defect or something. Now I heard she can. She just chooses not to, like some kind of vow of silence shit. That's not a SEAL, that's a freak. The Marine Corps liaison officer, a barrel-chested captain named Driscoll with jump wings and a combat action ribbon, stood at the front of the room reviewing notes. He glanced up, saw Volkov in the back, and something flickered across his face. Not quite respect, not quite dismissal, something in between. He'd seen her file. He knew what she'd done in Kandahar and Mosul, in places that didn't make it into official reports. But files were one thing. The woman sitting in his briefing room was another. "Listen up," Driscoll said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife through silk. "We're running a joint training evolution this week. SEAL Team 3 is lending us one of their operators to evaluate our close-quarters battle protocols. Lieutenant Volkov will be observing, assessing, and participating in all drills. You will extend her the professional courtesy you'd extend any SEAL operator." He paused, let that sink in. "That means you treat her like you'd treat a teammate. Clear?" A few mumbled affirmatives, most just stared. Driscoll's jaw tightened. "I said clear." "Clear, sir," came the louder response. But the looks they gave Volkov said otherwise. The way the Marine nearest to her shifted his chair 6 inches away. The way 3 others in the second row exchanged glances and suppressed smirks. The way the largest of them, a staff sergeant with forearms like bridge cables and a neck that disappeared into his shoulders, leaned over to whisper something to his buddy that made both of them chuckle. Volkov sat perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. Her hands rested on her thighs. Her breathing never changed. But her eyes, pale gray like winter sky over the Baltic, tracked every movement in the room with the patient attention of a sniper counting heartbeats. The Marine Staff Sergeant noticed her looking. He held her gaze for 3 seconds, then grinned and mouthed 2 words, "Prove it." She blinked once, slow, deliberate, then returned her attention to Driscoll at the front of the room. The captain was explaining the evolution schedule. Day 1 would be basic combatives and hand-to-hand refreshers. Day 2 would be urban assault drills. Day 3 through 5 would be scenario-based training in the kill house. Standard stuff. Nothing the Marines hadn't done 100 times. Nothing that would require a SEAL babysitter, in their opinion. "Before we break," Driscoll said, checking his watch, "we're going to do a quick icebreaker. Staff Sergeant Kozak has volunteered to demonstrate proper takedown technique with Lieutenant Volkov." The room erupted in barely suppressed laughter. Kozak, the mountain of a man who'd mouthed the challenge, stood up with a smile that showed too many teeth. 6'4", 240 pounds, hands that could palm a basketball, arms that had bench-pressed 400 pounds for reps. He'd been Marine Corps Martial Arts Program Instructor of the Year twice. He had 3 Combat Distinguishing Device ribbons. He'd fought in Fallujah when he was 19 and hadn't lost a hand-to-hand bout in 15 years. "Happy to demonstrate, sir," Kozak said. He rolled his neck, cracked his knuckles. The Marines around him whistled and clapped. Volkov stood without being asked. She moved to the front of the room with the same silent efficiency she'd used to enter it. She wore standard Navy-type III working uniform, sleeves rolled to the elbows revealing forearms that were lean, corded with muscle but not bulky. 5'7", maybe 135. Next to Kazakh, she looked like a child standing beside a grizzly bear. Driscoll stepped back, giving them room. This is just a demonstration. Staff Sergeant Kazakh will attempt a basic front takedown. Lieutenant Volkov will demonstrate defensive counters. On my mark. The two faced each other in the center of the room. Kazakh bounced on his toes, loose and confident. Volkov stood completely still, arms at her sides, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. Her face remained blank. Her eyes stayed on Kazakh's center mass, not his face. She didn't blink. "Ready?" Driscoll asked. Kazakh nodded, grinning. Volkov said nothing. "Go." Kazakh moved fast for a big man, shooting in for a double-leg takedown with textbook form. His lead foot planted, his hips dropped, his arms extended to wrap her legs. He'd done this 10,000 times. The muscle memory was perfect, the execution flawless. He never touched her. Volkov's hands moved faster than the eye could follow, both palms striking the sides of Kazakh's head simultaneously as she pivoted her hips away from his reach. The sound was like two books slamming shut. Kazakh's vision went white. His inner ears screamed. His forward momentum carried him past where she'd been standing, but she was already moving, already flowing around his blind side. Her right leg swept his left ankle just as his weight shifted forward. Her left hand found the base of his skull, fingers splayed, applying pressure to nerve clusters that turned his legs to water. Kazakh hit the floor face first with a sound like a sandbag dropped from height. The entire sequence took 1.3 seconds. The room went dead silent. Kazakh pushed himself up on his forearms, shaking his head, trying to clear the ringing in his ears. Before he could rise, Volkov was already moving again. She stepped over his back, her right foot hooking his right ankle, her left knee dropping onto his spine just below the shoulder blades, her hands finding his wrists and pulling them up and back in a control hold that made every Marine in the room wince. Kazakh grunted, his face pressed against the floor, completely immobilized. "Tap out," Driscoll said quietly. Kazakh hesitated for half a second, pride fighting instinct. Then his hand slapped the floor twice. Volkov released immediately, standing and stepping back in one fluid motion. She extended her hand to help Kazakh up. He stared at it for a long moment, then took it. She pulled him to his feet with surprising strength for someone half his size. He rubbed his neck, his face red, his jaw tight. But when he met her eyes, something had changed. "Good technique," he said, his voice rough. Volkov nodded once, then turned and walked back to her seat. The Marines watched her go. Nobody whispered now. Nobody smirked. They just watched, reassessing, recalculating. The quiet girl who didn't talk had just put their best hand-to-hand fighter on his face in less than 2 seconds without breaking a sweat, without changing expression, without saying a single word. Driscoll cleared his throat. "As I was saying, you will extend Lieutenant Volkov the professional courtesy she's earned. Dismissed for morning PT. Formation in 15 minutes. The Marines filed out, most of them giving Volkov a wider berth now. Not from fear exactly, from something closer to cautious respect. The kind you give a weapon you don't fully understand yet. Kazakh was the last to leave. He paused at the door, looked back at Volkov sitting alone in the corner. She met his gaze without expression. He nodded just barely, then left. When the room was empty except for her and Driscoll, the captain approached. "You didn't have to go that hard," he said. "Would have been enough to just block the takedown." Volkov looked at him with those pale gray eyes and said nothing. Driscoll sighed. "Right, I forgot, you don't do half measures." He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, your reputation precedes you. Some of these guys think you're here because of some diversity push. They don't know shit, but they will." He left. Volkov remained seated, alone in the briefing room. She pulled a small notebook from her cargo pocket, opened it to a blank page and wrote one line in neat, precise handwriting. Day 1. Subject demonstrates adequate defensive reflexes. Recommend increased resistance in subsequent trials. She closed the notebook, slipped it back into her pocket, then sat in the silence, waiting for her heart rate to return to baseline before joining the Marines for PT. It took exactly 90 seconds. When she finally stood and headed for the door, her shadow stretched long across the empty chairs, and in that moment, if anyone had been there to see it, they might have noticed something. The way she moved through space as if she took up less of it than she should. The way her footsteps made no sound. The way she seemed to exist in the world without disturbing it. The staff duty officer, a young Marine corporal sitting at the desk outside the briefing room, watched her pass through the hallway. He'd heard the sounds through the door, the impact, the silence that followed. When Volkov walked by, he sat up a little straighter, his spine automatically aligning in the presence of someone who moved like that. She gave him a single glance, no expression, and kept walking. He waited until she was gone, then pulled out his phone and texted his buddy in Charlie company. That SEAL chick just dumped Kazakh in one move. I mean dumped him. No shit. The response came back in seconds. Bullshit. Dead serious. Kazakh looks like he saw a ghost. Pics or it didn't happen. Bro, nobody was pulling their phone out. It was over in like 2 seconds. She moved so fast I barely saw it. Still calling bullshit. The corporal pocketed his phone and went back to his duty roster, but his mind kept replaying what he'd heard. The brief sound of contact, the heavy thud of a big man hitting the ground, the silence after. He'd been a Marine for 3 years. He'd seen combat in Syria. He'd trained with special operations units before. But something about the way Volkov moved, the complete absence of wasted motion or unnecessary force, made him think of something his drill instructor had said during boot camp. The most dangerous people in the world are the quiet ones, because they've already done all their screaming where you couldn't hear it. Outside, the morning sun was climbing over the Pacific, turning the sky from gray to gold. The Marine company formed up on the PT field in neat ranks, their voices loud with the usual pre-workout banter. Kazakh stood at the front with the other NCOs, his face still flushed, his ego bruised but his respect earned. When Volkov emerged from the barracks building in PT gear, black shorts and gray navy shirt, her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, the joke stopped. The Marines watched her join the formation at the rear, taking a spot in the back row where she could see everyone and everyone could see her. The company first sergeant, a veteran of 22 years with a voice like gravel in a blender, called them to attention. Right face, forward march. The formation moved as one toward the running trail that wound through the base, past the obstacle course, through the eucalyptus grove and back along the beach. 5 miles. Standard morning distance. Volkov ran in the back of the pack, her stride even and economical. She didn't push to the front to prove anything, didn't lag to hide, just ran at the pace of the formation, her breathing controlled, her face showing nothing. The Marines around her kept glancing over, some obviously, some trying to be subtle, all of them wondering the same thing. What else can she do? At the 3-mile mark, the first sergeant called for a change of pace. Double time, let's see what you got. The formation surged forward, competitive instincts kicking in. The younger Marines pushed hard, trying to establish pecking order. The older ones settled into a sustainable sprint, knowing that the guy who burns out at mile 4 loses harder than the guy who never tried. Volkov accelerated without apparent effort. Her stride lengthened, but her form stayed perfect. No wasted motion in her arms, no bounce in her step, just smooth, efficient speed that ate up ground like a machine. Within 60 seconds, she'd moved from the back of the pack to the middle. Within 2 minutes, she was in the front third. She never looked strained, never changed her breathing pattern, just ran like someone who'd learned a long time ago that pain was temporary but quitting was forever. Kazak, running near the front with the other senior NCOs, noticed her coming. He pushed harder, his pride demanding that he not let the SEAL who dumped him on his ass also outrun him. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. He held pace for another quarter-mile, then felt her pull alongside. He turned his head, expecting to see her struggling, wanting to see some sign that she was human. She was looking straight ahead, her face calm, her eyes focused on the horizon. No strain, no struggle. She ran like she fought, with absolute economy and zero wasted energy. Kazak pushed harder for another 30 seconds, then felt something in his left hamstring twinge. He backed off, not willing to blow out a muscle over pride. Volkov pulled ahead, not sprinting, not showing off, just maintaining her pace as if she could hold it forever. By the time the formation completed the 5 miles and returned to the PT field, Volkov was in the top 5 finishers. None of them were women. All of them were Marines who'd trained their entire adult lives for this. She crossed the finish line, checked her watch, then moved immediately into a cool-down walk, her heart rate already dropping, her system already beginning recovery. The first sergeant watched her with narrowed eyes. He'd been doing this for over 2 decades. He'd seen every type of operator, from the flashy glory hounds to the quiet professionals. Volkov was something else, something that didn't fit the usual categories. He made a mental note to pull her file after morning chow. The formation broke up, Marines heading to the showers and then breakfast. Volkov walked alone, as usual, her pace measured, her attention on her surroundings. She noticed everything. The way 3 Marines from 2nd Platoon followed her at a distance, trying to look casual. The way Kazak stood talking with 2 other staff sergeants, all of them glancing her direction. The way the company commander's vehicle pulled up to the admin building, and a lieutenant colonel in crisp khakis climbed out, his eyes scanning the PT field. She filed it all away. Pattern recognition, threat assessment, the habits that kept you alive in places where attention to detail was the difference between going home and going home in a box. In the shower, the few female Marines who'd been in the formation gave her space. Not hostile, just uncertain. One of them, a lance corporal named Tors with a combat action ribbon and 2 deployments under her belt, finally broke the silence. "You were in Mosul during the siege, right?" Volkov looked at her, nodded once. Tors waited for elaboration. Got none. "My brother was Army Ranger. He was there too. 75th. He said there was a SEAL team running direct action missions in the old city. Said they had a female operator who moved like a ghost. Said she cleared more buildings than whole platoons." Volkov turned off her shower, grabbed her towel, said nothing. "Was that you?" Volkov met her eyes, held them for 3 seconds, then nodded once and walked away. Tors stood under the water, her mind processing what she'd just heard confirmed. The stories she dismissed as exaggeration. The rumors about a female SEAL who operated in areas where most men wouldn't survive. The quiet professional who'd earned a silver star in circumstances that remained classified. By the time Tors finished her shower and headed to the chow hall, the story had already spread through the company like wildfire. Most of it was bullshit, details added or changed with each retelling. But the core remained. The quiet SEAL was the real deal. Mosul veteran, direct action operator. Someone you didn't fuck with unless you wanted to end up like Kazak, face first on the floor, wondering what the hell just happened. Breakfast was served in a long hall that smelled of coffee, eggs, and institutional cooking oil. Volkov took a tray, loaded it with protein and complex carbs in precise ratios, then found a seat near the windows where she could watch both entrances. Old habits. You didn't sit with your back to the door, not after the things she'd seen. She ate methodically, her attention split between her food and the room around her. Kazak entered with 3 other NCOs, all of them carrying themselves with the swagger of men who'd earned their place. They saw her sitting alone. Kazakh said something to his buddies, then broke away from the group and approached her table. He stood there for a moment, tray in hand, waiting. Volkov looked up, expression neutral. "Mind if I sit?" Kazakh asked. She gestured to the chair across from her. He sat, his bulk making the chair creak. For a minute, neither of them spoke. They just ate, two professionals sharing space. Finally, Kazakh set down his fork. "You ever going to tell me what the hell that was?" Volkov looked at him. "That move, in the briefing room. I've been doing this for 15 years. Trained with Force Recon. Trained with Raiders. Never seen anything that fast." She picked up her water bottle, took a drink, set it down. Then pulled a napkin from the dispenser, smoothed it on the table, and drew a quick diagram with her pen. Top view of two figures. Lines indicating movement. Angles of force. She slid it across to him. Kazakh studied it, his trained eye recognizing the physics of what she'd done. "You waited for my weight to commit forward, then used my own momentum against me. The palm strikes disrupted my equilibrium, the leg sweep removed my base, and the pressure point control finished it." He looked up. "That's not MCMAP. That's not even standard SEAL training." Volkov took the napkin back, crumpled it, kept eating. "Russian," Kazakh said, recognition dawning. "Systema, you're trained in Systema." She didn't confirm or deny, just maintained eye contact. "Your name is Volkov. Your file says you were born in Vladivostok, naturalized when you were 12. You learned it before you came to the States." Still nothing. Kazakh leaned back, reassessing. "You don't talk because you don't need to. Everything you need to communicate, you communicate through action." Volkov's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not quite approval, not quite acknowledgement, but something. "Fair enough," Kazakh said. He picked up his fork, went back to his eggs. "For what it's worth, I'm not pissed about earlier. I needed that. We all did. We've gotten comfortable, forgotten what it's like to face someone who's actually dangerous." He paused. "You're dangerous, not because you're aggressive, because you're efficient." She nodded once, the first real acknowledgement she'd given anyone since arriving. They finished breakfast in companionable silence. When Kazakh stood to leave, he extended his hand. "Looking forward to the kill house drills. I want to see how you clear corners." She took his hand. Her grip was strong, her skin calloused from years of handling weapons and climbing ropes and doing the kind of physical work that most people couldn't imagine. She met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, the corners of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile, but not quite not a smile either. Kazakh left and Volkov returned to her meal. Alone again, but somehow less isolated than before. Something had shifted. The first crack in the wall of skepticism. The first Marine who'd chosen to see her as an operator rather than an oddity. It was a start. The rest of the day followed standard training protocol. Weapons maintenance, tactical reviews, briefings on the upcoming kill house evolution. Volkov observed everything, participated when appropriate, and maintained her characteristic silence. The Marines were starting to adjust to her presence, starting to read her body language, the slight tilt of her head that meant negative, the barely perceptible nod that meant continue, the way her eyes tracked potential threats even in the safety of the base. By evening formation, the hostility had faded to curiosity. And curiosity, Volkov knew, was the first step toward acceptance. Captain Driscoll watched from his office window as the company assembled for final formation of the day. He saw Volkov standing in the back rank, perfectly aligned, perfectly still. He saw the way the Marines around her no longer shifted away, the way some of them actually stood a little straighter, as if her presence demanded better performance from everyone. His phone buzzed. Text from the battalion commander. "Heard your SEAL made an impression. Good. These Marines need to remember what elite looks like." Driscoll smiled and pocketed his phone. Day 1 was complete. 29 more days to go. He had a feeling things were about to get interesting. Outside, the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Volkov stood in formation, her eyes on the horizon, her mind already running through tomorrow's scenarios. The kill house. Close quarters battle. Her element. She'd cleared hundreds of buildings in her career, from mud brick compounds in Afghanistan to Soviet-era concrete towers in Iraq. The Marines were about to see what she was really capable of. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, after formation dismissed, she would return to her temporary quarters, complete her evening routine of stretching and equipment maintenance, and write another entry in her notebook. A record of observations. A catalog of personalities and capabilities. The quiet work of a professional who understood that every training evolution was an opportunity to learn something new about the people you might someday fight beside. The first sergeant called the formation to attention. Company dismissed. The Marines broke ranks, voices rising in the usual end-of-day chatter. Volkov walked alone toward her quarters, her shadow long in the fading light. Behind her, Kazak watched her go, his respect growing with each hour. He'd underestimated her. They all had. Tomorrow in the kill house, he suspected they were about to learn just how badly. Dawn came cold and gray, fog rolling in from the ocean to shroud the base in thick mist. Volkov was already awake, had been for hours. Old habits from deployments where dawn meant stand to, where the transition from night to day was when attacks came. She completed her morning routine in silence. 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 300 air squats. No music, no distractions, just her and the work. By the time the base loudspeakers crackled with reveille, she was dressed, her gear staged, her weapons checked. She moved through the pre-mission ritual with the calm precision of someone who'd done this so many times it had become meditation. The kill house sat at the edge of the base, a sprawling complex of interconnected rooms and corridors designed to simulate every kind of urban environment from shipping warehouses to residential buildings to shopping centers. The Marines had been training there for months, running countless iterations of room clearing and hostage rescue. They were good, but good in a controlled environment was different from good when things went sideways. Different from good when the person on the other side of the wall was actually trying to kill you. Volkov arrived at the kill house before anyone else as usual. She walked the exterior first, noting sight lines and angles, then checked the ready room where operators staged before entering the structure. Everything was standard, professional. The Marines ran a tight training program, but she saw the small things that separated training from reality. The paintball guns that lacked the weight of real weapons, the role players who telegraphed their movements, the scenarios that followed predictable patterns. She made notes in her head, suggestions she'd give Driscoll later, not criticisms, improvements. There was a difference. When the Marine Company arrived for morning formation, the mood was different from the day before. Anticipation mixed with nervousness. Everyone knew today was the day they'd see what the Quiet Seal could really do. The first evolution would be a demonstration. Volkov would clear 3 rooms solo while the Marines observed. Standard hostage rescue scenario. 3 rooms, 2 hostiles in each room, 1 hostage in the final room. Fast, violent, precise. Captain Driscoll gathered the company around the observation window that looked into the kill house. "Watch carefully," he said. "Lieutenant Volkov is going to demonstrate proper room clearing technique at operational speed. This isn't a training pace. This is how it's done when lives are on the line." The Marines pressed close to the window, some skeptical, most curious. Kazak stood at the front, his arms crossed, his eyes focused. He'd spent the night thinking about what he'd seen in the briefing room. The speed, the precision. He wanted to see what she could do with a weapon in her hand and targets that shot back. Volkov entered the staging area wearing full kit. Plate carrier with ceramic plates, helmet with night vision mount, tactical gloves, magazine pouches loaded with paintball magazines marked to simulate real ammunition. Her primary weapon was a modified paintball rifle that matched the weight and handling of an HK-416. Her sidearm was similarly weighted. Everything was as close to real as training could get. She performed her pre-mission checks with automatic precision. Magazines seated and tested, Charging handle racked, safety verified, sidearm checked, comms tested, every movement economical, every second counted. She'd done this before stepping into buildings where the people inside were waiting with AK-47s and suicide vests, where mistakes meant body bags. Driscoll's voice came over the radio. "Bravo 1, you are clear to commence when ready." Volkov keyed her mic once, acknowledgement without words, then moved to the door. The Marines leaned forward, watching through the glass. The timer started. Volkov didn't count it down in her head. Didn't need to. Her internal clock was calibrated from hundreds of operations. She knew exactly how long she had before the scenario timer penalized for slowness. 20 seconds per room. 60 seconds total. Most operators took 90 to 200 seconds for this evolution. The really fast ones could do it in 75. Hit the door moving at full speed. The breach was textbook perfect. Door kicked open, immediate entry, rifle up, scanning from her sector to the far corner in a smooth arc. 2 role players with paintball guns stood in defensive positions, one behind a table, one in the corner. They started to raise their weapons. Never finished the movement. Volkov's rifle cracked twice, both targets marked with center mass hits before they'd completed their draw. Both role players raised their hands, signaling hits. Time elapsed, 2.4 seconds. She flowed to the next door without stopping. No celebration, no pause to admire her work, just movement, constant, fluid, aggressive movement. The second room had a different layout, an L shape with a blind corner. Harder. The role players were positioned to exploit the dead space. Most operators would slice the corner, exposing themselves incrementally. Volkov went low and fast, dropping to one knee as she rounded the corner, changing her level and presenting a target where the defenders weren't aiming. Her rifle tracked smoothly, 2 more shots, 2 more hits. The role players threw up their hands. Time elapsed, 4.1 seconds total. The Marines watching from the observation window were dead silent now, mouths open, eyes wide. The final room was the hardest. Hostage scenario. 1 role player positioned behind a mock hostage, using them as a shield. The other role player concealed behind furniture with only partial exposure. This was the scenario that separated the competent from the elite. The one where hesitation meant the hostage died, where aggression meant you shot the innocent. Volkov hit the door with the same explosive speed as the previous entries, but her scan was different this time. Slower, more precise. She identified the hostage position in a fraction of a second, marked the threats, calculated angles. The concealed role player broke cover to engage, his paintball gun coming up. Volkov's rifle tracked him, but she held her shot for 1 heartbeat, letting him commit fully to his movement. When he stepped into the open, trying to get a better angle on her, she fired once. Center mass. He signaled hit and dropped. The role player holding the hostage tried to use the distraction, shifting his aim toward Volkov while keeping the hostage as a shield. It was a realistic tactic, the kind of thing actual hostage takers did. But he made one mistake. He moved his gun before he moved his head. For 0.06 seconds, his weapon was exposed before his eyes could acquire her position. Volkov's round hit his exposed wrist, not center mass, not the easy shot, the precision shot that disarmed without risking the hostage. The role player's gun clattered to the floor.